what is your newest film about? Tell me something more.
The film starts out like a really traditional rom-com. Aisling Bea is about to marry Colin Hanks, and then in the 5th minute, bam, he dies. And you're like, what in the hell just happened? So instead of doing the traditional way of coping with her grief, she decides to marry him anyway and to overcome the objections of her family, the law of the land, and public opinion to be able to do so. Believe it or not, hilarity ensues. So it's a dramedy about grief.
And yeah, it's a very, very ingenious premise. I'm very curious, how did you come up with the story?
Strangely enough, or should I say not strangely, this is a real life phenomenon. So in France in particular, they happen semi-regularly, posthumous marriages. The official term for them is necrogamy, which is a disgusting word, and it sounds like something horrible done to corpses. But in France, it's semi-regular, and you have to write to the president to get permission to marry someone after they've died. And you know, if you want to have your heart broken, it's worth Googling Javier Huguedes, who was a heroic policeman who died in the line of duty in a terrorism attack, funnily enough, saving an Australian woman's life, who then also tragically passed. And so President Macron granted him a public funeral / wedding to his boyfriend, Etienne Cardides. So that's where the premise came from. We did fudge the truth a little bit in our film because it is not legal in England yet. But maybe this film might help change that.
Hopefully. And do you also like put some, personal experiences into that story as well?
Yes, sadly, I have. My mum passed from COVID in January 2022, January 30th, 2022, which was obviously devastating. And then, while I was in pieces, a week later, I got a call saying that Universal were going to make my movie. So personally, I've always felt like my mum, I know it sounds hippy-dippy and crazy, but that she had something to do with this film getting made. Unfortunately, it's a bond that I share with a lot of the cast and crew. So Billy Lords, who's incredible in the film, famously lost her mother, and her mother was Carrie Fisher, aka Princess Leia, and her grandmother Debbie Reynolds, who's was a big star of her own day, think Singing in the Rain, and she lost them in a 48-hour period. Aisling Bea, who tragically lost her father at the age of 3, and even Colin Hanks, who we all assume has had this blessed life because his father is, a global treasure, Tom Hanks. And we think that Rita Wilson is his mother, but actually his mother passed when he was 18. So we're all bonded through grief, and so many of the cast members and the crew all shared this terrible bond. And we also all had a passion for telling a story that lets you laugh through the tears, because, which seems like a weird and taboo thing to say, but grieving can actually be a funny experience at times. So as an example, when I lost my mum, we gathered around her bed and we played her favorite songs. And her all-time favorite song is Bette Midler's The Rose, which is an Oscar-winning song from back in the day. And if you haven't seen the movie The Rose, it's beautiful with Bette. And when The Rose came on, my mum opened her eyes for the last time and looked around at all of us, and we were singing our guts out, and we've all inherited my mother's singing ability, which is absolute zero. We make tone deaf people sound like Pavarotti, and an incredible buzz of the film is that Bet watched it and loved it and gave us this well-loved song, The Rose, for the finale of the film. And the finale of the film is a tribute to all of the lost, the departed loved ones of our cast and crew.
I'm curious, as a follow-up to what you're saying about the entire story about you working in the film and about your mother. Like, was it difficult for you to recall those experiences while shooting this film, or maybe, talking about that with the crew kind of helps you to find the inner strength to continue working on your project? Because what I'm asking is basically, personally, I really can't imagine myself being ready to work after such a tragedy, but you still finish your film. So I'm curious, how did you manage to do that?
So in the film, Gemma, as played by Aisling B, has this incredible quest, and the whole film is about, I'm going to marry my dead husband. I'm going to marry my dead husband. And she has these incredible challenges that she has to overcome. And it's a single-minded thing. And anyone who's lost someone will be able to tell you that you do compartmentalize, like, for instance, preparing and planning the funeral. And for me, losing my mum was obviously the most gut-wrenching thing that's ever happened to me in my life. But the film became my obsession, and I was determined, no matter what was going to happen. They slashed our budget. I gave most of my fee up just to be able to keep the movie on the road. And on the last day, the last scene was an incredibly personal one about having to do the funeral arrangements. And it's very impersonal, it's very cold, it's very commercial as an experience. Like, you go through a ring binder, and pick out the flowers and the bloody tombstone and the bloody coffin. And watching it, I felt myself starting to dissolve, and we called cut on the final shot. And I absolutely fell to pieces and embarrassed the hell out of myself in front of the cast and crew, and just sobbed. And thankfully, my cast were amazing and so supportive, especially Aisling was really wonderful at that moment.
Did shooting this film kind of allow you to go through the grief process in a way?
I mean, absolutely, mate. It's such a smart question. There's several parts to that. It's a really complex question. So the first part is the research that I had to do. I'm reading all of these grief books, like the famous Kubler-Ross book, The 5 Stages of Grief. And in reading it, I'm prepping for directing, but I'm also healing myself and starting to understand things. Like, one of the central tensions of the film is that Aisling's mother, as played by the incredible Sinead Cusack, wants her to stop trying to marry posthumously because she thinks it's crazy and that her daughter is losing her mind. And what I came from reading these books is I realized this is a very, very natural thing that people time and time again will try and tell you how you have to grieve. And I think the biggest outtake of the film is that there is no right way to grieve, that everyone has their own bizarre way of dealing with it. People don't want to see you go through that pain because it's painful for them to see your pain. And that's a central theme of the film is, people trying to control and tell you the right way that you have to do things when it comes to grief, which is obviously messy.
And I understood that you kind of openly discussed the certain losses that the people you and your crew lost throughout your life. And I'm curious, like, has it allowed you, to find a common language with your actors? I'm asking because I'm curious how you led and guided your crew, because it's a very exceptional cast. So I'm curious if maybe kind of helped when you opened yourself?
Yeah, again, you're so right, Jan. I mean, it allowed me to have a common language with the cast and crew. It allowed us to be open and honest in a way that I don't think we would be able to otherwise, because we had this common shared unfortunate bond of grief. And it just meant when someone said something, you had to listen, right? Because they're not just making it up. This is their life, that they've gone through this grief and they've dealt with this grief their entire life. You know, I know Aisling talks beautifully about how the loss of her father shaped her to want to be a comedian. You know, it's certainly my life's mission is to help people laugh and talk about the really difficult stuff. So we had that bond, we had that level of communication, but it just meant, you know, I'm not just making stuff up. You know, I'm not just pulling it out of my ass, as we would say in Australia, to it, because you get to say, I know what it's like and I know what you're feeling. And I think it reopened a lot for all of us.
When I was watching your film, I also had in mind the statement you wrote as a director about the death of your mother and how it has an impact on you. And I was thinking how fiction corresponds with reality. So basically, in a film, you know, the partner who dies is never able to attend the wedding in the end. And in the same way, your mother unfortunately wasn't able to to go to the day of the premiere of your film and see it and kind of share this joy with you. I'm kind of curious about your afterthoughts on that. How you know film can somehow imitate the reality, and how maybe there are some certain feelings that you want to tell but you can't, but you can put them in film. So as a conclusion for our talk, I'm curious about that.
I think one of the great challenges of this film is that I wanted it to be gut-wrenchingly, unflinchingly emotional, but also really accessible and really funny. You know, one of my touchstones for this film was Muriel's wedding. It's the 30th anniversary this year for Muriel's wedding, which, by the way, crazily enough, is Ridley Scott's favorite film of all time. And so to find that tone, I had to have amazing actors, and Aisling is the single greatest actor I've ever worked with. She is so funny, so powerful in her dramatic performance, and had me in tears a lot. So the ending of the whole film is a tribute to everyone's lost loved ones. I think I mentioned before that when we lost my mum, we gathered around her bed to play her favorite tracks, and the last time she ever opened her eyes was when Bette Midler's The Rose came on, which is her favorite song. And so one of the great buzzes of this film is that Bette gave us my mum's favorite song. And when you get to the end of the film, there is a tribute not just to my mum with Bette Midler's The Rose, but to every cast and crew member's loved one. You know, they all dedicated their work to someone who they had lost, just to make it really personal for everyone involved. And I don't know if I'm ever going to be done processing it. You know, I still talk to my mum most days. I talked to her this morning. Obviously, I didn't literally talk to her because I'm not mental, but you know, whenever a photo comes up for her on my phone or anything, I talk to her about what's happening, and God, I would love to have had her at the premiere. I think she'd be so proud, and she'd be tickled pink that Bette Midler knows who the hell she is, and that I got this film made for her.
Thank you so much for today, and thank you for sharing all of this. And the film is amazing, and I hope that a lot of people gonna see it, and it's gonna affect them in a very certain way, and they also gonna be able to.
That's so kind of you to say, Jan. I really appreciate it. That's very, very kind of you. And yeah, hopefully people get to go out and watch And Misses. You know, it's a really honest film, and you know, I'd say to anyone who's going through grief out there at the moment, hopefully this is a film that will speak to you and might even help you. And And if you're not going through grief, I will say that I'm obsessed with rom-coms, and this is a spin on a rom-com that you'll never have seen before and are unlikely to ever see again. Unless all of a sudden there's a spate of 8 different films about people marrying dead people. Weirder things have happened in Hollywood, right? So fingers crossed. All right. Thank you so much, Jan.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, mate.